Sam's just hopping on right here as
Yeah,
well.
there he
Hey,
is.
how you doing?
Are you guys based in LA?
I'm in LA and Sam's in New York.
Very
I'm
cool.
watching rain lash out my window right now. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah,
wasn't here, but
I'm listening to all the parrots over here just go crazy. So we really try to mix and match.
yeah, both sides.
Well, I actually want to start by being maybe embarrassingly transparent. So when I saw the title for the film, I swear, all the way up until I watched it, I pronounced it Lien. And it just never occurred to me until after I watched the movie. And then I think I typed it out in all caps that it's Alien. And that makes a lot of sense. And so I guess I kind of wanted to start with the stylization of the title. Is there any particular reason for that?
Totally. I mean, I'll jump in here first, Sam. I mean, yeah. So we actually call it Aileen.
Okay,
That's
great. So I was right.
Yeah,
yeah.
you're correct.
I think so. You were totally spot on. We were really interested in the play on words, in the space between a lean, right, and the word lean, right, being having all kinds of financial commitments where you're owed something back. We were really interested in that. There's kind of this interesting play on words in that space with Aline, and then also, of course, it being alien. And we thought that was a really interesting kind of, in some ways, metaphor for the film.
Very cool. Okay, well, I'm glad to know I wasn't terribly off base with that.
No. It's confused people from day one. When you pick a title for a film, it's there's so many things go into it, and it's hard to know, if it's if it's the right one. But we like the kind of like subtlety here. We thought it was an interesting piece.
It's certainly a good talking point. So I applaud you on
exactly.
that. If I'm not mistaken, this film had its world premiere at the Seattle International Film Festival. Is that correct?
It actually world premiered in Flickerfest in Australia, but it's sort of the biggest premiere it's had. Well, actually, it's going to be at Austin Film Festival in like 2 to 3 weeks.
That's right.
Awesome,
I recommended it to someone who was asking about what to see at Austin. So.
Oh yeah, we're really stoked. Yeah, it's cool, and it's actually nominated for the jury award for best short, which is pretty exciting as well. So, but no, Seattle was one of the bigger places it played before.
Yeah, and VIF, of course,
Yeah, VIF is huge, and then
yes, of course,
before VIF, yeah, and Rhode Island is a big festival we went to as well.
Yeah, no, it's nice to see this movie making the rounds of film festivals, but I guess I bring up Seattle because I particularly appreciate that it keeps ending up here in the Pacific Northwest. After I saw it and realized that it played at Seattle, I was bummed that I didn't cover shorts at Seattle. So it totally flew over my past my radar, and I didn't get to see it. But that's why I'm really happy that it's here in Vancouver and that people get to see it up here.
Us too.
That's awesome. Yeah, the shorts programs were great in Seattle. I was there in Seattle for that festival, and just like incredible, cornucopia of really beautiful shorts. So highly recommended for the future.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've talked a lot about how happy I am about being in. Well, I mean, not happy. It's a harrowing film, but I'm glad that I've been able to experience it. Can you really quick, one of you just give a quick synopsis on what the film's about?
Totally.
Yeah. So it's a film. You want to go? It's about a couple on the day of their green card interview, essentially, and things devolve from there.
Things devolve. That's a really concise way of putting it. I like to go into movies kind of blind, and so I didn't even really get a sense of what the synopsis was, and then I watched it, and just like the escalation of tension and anxiety that happens in the film is so excellently executed here. I'm going to ask about that in a minute, but first I want to know what inspired you guys to make a movie like this.
Yeah, we were really inspired. As Sam and I have done, we've been working together for quite a few years now, and we're constantly always reading and thinking about like what's happening, obviously in our broader world, and we just kept finding that we were having conversations about immigration and talking with people who had gone through the immigration process, and as we just found that this was just something that was part of our conversation over and over again, we kept researching more and more. We just kept running into this place where we felt like fundamentally we have an immigration system which is, it's a system, for people, obviously deciding who gets to come into the United States. And yet we had a whole process fundamentally felt kind of inhumane. So it was like a process for people, but that was like not designed for people to actually be able to go through. We thought that was such an interesting contradiction, and obviously such a horrific contradiction, that felt so important to talk about and make a film about.
Yeah, in this specific instance, these characters in this scenario is a very tiny sort of like slice of an enormous, immigration debacle in a lot of ways in the U.S. and trying to kind of like, use this kind of example specifically as a microcosm of the larger like confusion and problems that exist in the system overall.
Yeah, immigration is quite the conversation to be had in America, and that's another thing that I kind of want to come back around to with this film. But I guess with this movie being so having so much tension and anxiety, I think I realized that that's something that you guys do in your productions, because I watched Flounder after I watched Alien, and just to kind of get a sense of like what are the consistencies in your filmmaking, and that tension and that anxiety is something that you guys are really proficient at. So I want to know more about writing that into your films. How do you approach writing tension and suspense into your stories?
Well, it's a good question. I think, the big thing about it is short in general, but like, what is the drip feed of information that you get across the film? How do you sort of like meter out what the viewer is experiencing, and and how kind of like that can build or change your experience watching across the film? I think also a big piece of it too is trying to find decisions and like scenes that are pushed by the characters. And so we have this interesting kind of like, the characters move one way, the world responds a different way, the characters move another way, the world responds. And so you have this nice kind of like chain of action reaction that really can kind of like power your movie across its duration or whatever. And so I think, when thinking about writing tension, it's there's kind of a very there's a very specific kind of way that like we're bringing in these sort of like horror tropes, these thriller tropes into the language of those movies, into a space that in some ways isn't traditionally a horror thriller space. And so trying to find ways to imbue the moments that we have in these spaces that are not traditionally thriller or horror with those really intense elements or scenes is sort of like what makes this film, I think, work in some ways.
And I think I would just add in that, we think a lot about what we don't show, and I think that that's like a classic horror, use. And on this, as we think about what do you see on a screen of a phone, how do we frame it so that, we're not showing you a lot of things. And I think in many ways, we as humans, we want to see the whole picture, right? But when we can only see a little slice, it really adds an intensity to it. And that was certainly something that we found with Flounder and as well as Alien. Yeah.
Yeah, and also trying to like, where do you put your viewer in terms of their understanding? Where, like, are you behind the character's understanding? Are you ahead of the character's understanding? How do you like manipulate where the audience is, where they are in the character versus the character's knowledge of the scenario? And I think in both these films, we've tried really hard to keep you basically exactly abreast of where the characters are and their knowledge of what's going on. I think that keeps you on your toes and makes you, stay in the world of them. In the writing, we talked about various ways we could have explained things more or more clearly or more obviously. The characters, maybe they call somebody and then that person explains what's going on, and we sort of ended up stripping all that away. And it's like, no, it's better that if we're just in there, they're confused, we're confused, and that's like okay, and we can all live in that kind of like discomfort, and that helps again drive tension as well.
There's definitely a lot of discomfort that is kind of I don't want to say manufactured, but like built up in how the film opens and the franticness that exists there. So yeah, I think all of that, it was executed so well in this movie. There in these two productions, these are really, I think, important topics for awareness. And Flounder, there's the the dangerous ritual thing that you see in like colleges, and then hazing and things like that. And then here you have, what's that?
Toxic masculinity,
Yes, toxic masculinity. That's a very important topic that we're kind of as a society grappling with. And then here in Lien, we also we have this topic that I didn't even like. I know immigration is a problem, but like this particular situation and occurrence is something I had no knowledge of and no awareness of. Is that kind of an objective that you guys have when you approach a new story, is like to bring awareness to some important social topic?
Yeah, I think something that Sam and I talk a lot about is, how do we use the medium of film to both tell a story that's compelling, and to also talk about something that we think is of value to people, and as that is more than just, if you go to a horror film, a slasher, a lot of times, okay, sure, you feel a lot of adrenaline, but like, what is it saying? If you spent an hour, 2 hours at the theater, like, let's come away with something that feels valuable. But then also, a lot of times we would watch films that felt like they had something to say and they just weren't engaging. We'd watch these films and it'd feel like, oh my gosh, we're going to go to sleep now. And we thought, God, how do we continue to make things that are super engaging, that are really fun to watch, but that also, that talk about topics that we think have real conversations in them, and that are important to be learning about and talking about.
And how are we kind of grappling with like our societal, the cultural zeitgeist of the moment, and also like, making things that feel relevant to viewers who are watching them currently, and I feel like, I think in particular how the Hollywood system right now gets kind of lost up its own, navel gazing, sort of like looking at itself or into these crazy futures of, superheroes and things that don't exist, and not really attacking the world that we live in. And I think, art is a political medium, and I think we embrace that to some degree, as it also, functions with great storytelling, great characters, engaging pieces on their own.
There's just like 1,000 different ways I want to go with this conversation. We need longer than 30 minutes. But I guess from here, I kind of want to talk more about you guys and your career. You mentioned sitting, experiencing movies for an hour, 2 hours, which leads me to the question of feature filmmaking. Have you guys started entertaining that idea yet?
We have, we spent the last couple of years really diving hard into shorts. And we've done, I guess now 3 together that we're really super proud of, and have done. The first 2 are one's released, one's in festivals, and then one is about to be in festivals coming up for this coming year. So those are 3 incredible movies, great collaborations, great learning experiences for us, and I think has really laid a really nice groundwork as as a collaborative partnership. And so we're working on what will be our first feature we're in development for at the moment, and it's coming along nicely. It's a hard process making your first feature, and we're deep in the weeds, but I think it's been a really fulfilling process so far. And I don't know, David, you probably agree with that to some degree, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so Lien is the second short that Sam and I made together. We have another short that is just about to kind of start the process, so take a look for it. It's called Trapped.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I saw it listed on IMDb, and I wasn't sure how many questions to ask about that one, but I'm very excited about when that starts making the rounds.
Yeah, it's really good actually. Like we worked so hard on that film, and I think again they're all good, but this one feels like a real evolution of our style, and again is hopefully we can bring some of that into our feature filmmaking as well in the future.
Yeah, and it's fun. I think at the end of the day, one of the things that really drives Sam and I is we love telling stories, and we love telling stories together, and and so I think making working in the feature space is kind of the next evolution for us. It's been really fun to be able to expand the length and the depth of the types of stories that we can tell. We talk a lot about what are stories that are shorts length, and what are stories that are features length, and what are stories that are book length, or something else.
Full TV shows or whatever,
exactly. And so
trying to find tell the stories that are the medium that we're trying to go for, I think is something that we're working hard towards. And we're not making an Alien feature, we're not making a Flounder feature, we're making a different feature, because we sort of feel like we've the stories that we've talked about, that in these shorts so far fit into their little arcs pretty well, and so trying to explore different topics is something that excites us.
Yeah, I actually really like the mindfulness around that, because I think that it's more often than I prefer that movies or that stories are happening in a medium that maybe they don't fit in or belong in, especially now that we have the space of TV becoming having become a lot more prevalent. I see, sometimes really long films, it's like, actually that might have been better miniseries, or I see miniseries, it's like, man, that could have just been a really good 2-hour film. But particularly with your guys' shorts, what I find most interesting, and I'm happy that you're not trying to, I don't know, for lack of a better term, exploit them, because it seems like at the end of your shorts, there's not everything is tied up neatly. There's at least with Flounder and with Lien, there's some question about what happens with the character, but that's not the point of the story. And so like leaving that kind of open-endedness, I think, really solidifies this kind of style of short film storytelling that you guys do. So that's just,
I mean, I think which arcs end, which arcs continue is something that we're thinking a lot about. And how do we kind of like bring you to a conclusion that feels satisfying within the parameters of what we've kind of laid out, and again, the longer the film is, the more you can conclude things, and the shorter it is, the more kind of specific you have to be, or particular you have to be about which arcs you can conclude and which arcs don't conclude in the length of time. We talk a lot about like melodrama, where does a film kind of become melodramatic or not, and we think a lot of it has to do with not understanding which arcs you have the length to tie up, basically, or not. In a lot of shorts, they try and bend too big of an arc into too small of a little box, and you end up kind of overflowing your container with emotion, and it feels fake or sort of unrealistic. And so working hard to correctly size the arcs that we have for the time limit that we've got is important to us, I think, when we're writing in particular.
Absolutely. Sam, you had mentioned the collaborative partnership, which makes me, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, how is it working together? Tell me more about that dynamic.
I'm laughing because it's so good. Like like there's nobody on earth I would ever want to work with more than David. Like, it's actually nuts. Like I've worked in a couple of other sort of like collaborative partnerships in various ways, and haven't found as much success. And I think the secret, and I say this to people who ask me about this, the secret to a good collaborative partnership, among many, many, many other things, is you have to value the partnership more than the product, because the product is always going to fluctuate. It's going to have highs, it's going to have lows. Some days you're going to want to, throw everything in the trash. Some days you're going to be over the moon. And if you let the product, dictate the partnership collapses every time that you hit a trough. But if you can put the partnership in front of the product, then you're always going to ride it out. And I think that, collaborating with David is amazing for so many reasons. Reason number one, obviously we have, 31 years of shared experience, history. We can just instantly be like, hey, this scene is like this time, when we were both 10 and this thing happened. And it's like, oh, okay. Like we can both conjure that up instantly and like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense in this context. And that sort of deep shared language, shared experiences, and shared trust, I think, that like we, have with each other is a really exciting thing. It makes it really fun. And it's honestly a dream for me personally. David's like, I hate this guy, I'm never working with him. I'm just kidding, but and that's my opinion.
No, I mean it's so,
don't say the wrong thing, David.
Yeah. No, I mean it's such a delight working with Sam, and I think one of the things that I love about working together is, as Sam said, we have this shared history, obviously, but also we're very different people, and we spent a lot of years working professionally not together, and so I think we bring different things to the table, and it's been so wonderful. We had, almost, yeah, we had, a ton of years kind of doing our own things, and then to be able to come back and learn from each other and bring our different skill sets to the table. I know it's kind of cliche to be like, oh, well, opposites make good partnership, but there's a lot of places, I think, where we're different, and it's so helpful. I think it really helps us push each other to out of our comfort zones, and to, kind of throw ideas back and forth and have different lenses to look at that idea, but know at the end of the day that we're here for that partnership. I mean, I really strongly agree with what Sam said, where, it's about the partnership, and at the end of the day, it's about telling stories, and it's about our enjoyment of telling stories, which is the same as when we were both 8 and, telling stories, or, when we were in middle school together living, we shared a room our whole lives growing up, and we would just create stories. And so it was
stay late at night, pretending we were whatever, like that's that shared narrative experience together, playing Dungeons and Dragons together as kids, really exploring, these, imaginary worlds as a duo. That like shared imaginary play and space has really kind of like become a professional career, but it sort of started when we were really, really, really young. And it's really fun. It's as fun as it was then as it is now, which is kind of crazy,
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to, waking up and giving Sam a call in the morning and saying, okay, let's dive into it. So
this is my favorite part of the conversation. I really love how much you guys enjoy working together, and honestly, I think that has to contribute to how these projects are turning out, because they're really great things, and I cannot wait for whatever you guys produce together going forward. And independently as well. You guys seem to be very competent filmmakers and storytellers, and so when I see your names, I will be paying attention for sure.
Hopefully we can deliver.
I believe you will. To wrap up, any final thoughts on what kind of expectations you think audiences should have as they approach the film, Lien?
Expectations. I think for me, coming into it blind is my favorite way people watch it, because we worked so hard to both inform you of what's going on and not inform you of what's going on. We've meted out the information, I think, successfully and very intentionally, and so seeing it with sort of no context, I think, is the best way, because you really get our fully designed experience, for you as a viewer, I would say.
And David, any contribution to that idea?
No, I think I'll leave it at that. I like that.
Well, as one who did go into this very blind, I can say that the effect was extraordinary, and so I really appreciate that about this film, and I appreciate you guys having this conversation with me. I'm looking forward to hearing more about how this film plays for audiences and what you guys have coming up, which sounds like will be very soon.